The great thing about the Global Partners is I don't have to work alone. I work with a team, and I work with other incredible partners. I want to introduce you to one of our partners, but I want to tell you a little bit about this particular partnership that started off of weird calls that I got when I wasn't in this role. I was just a volunteer. Hey, can you help out? Can you kind of work through this? And the relationship we've built over about 6 years has been dynamic, fluid, weird, wacky, weird, wonky, and wacky. But we have had a lot of fun. So let me introduce you to our partner who's been working in Pucusana, Peru. We have our partner, Elena Prado Efio. I always have to get that correct. She's been running a school down there. She's using the building that we built down there. She's been working in overtime, doing all sorts of stuff. In this time, in COVID, she has been a pillar of the community. Her son has been working with her to the point where they both got COVID. And we thought we were going to lose Elena. God and your prayers pulled her through that. It's a rough patch. But the work that Elena's been doing down there is nothing short of miraculous, and that's because she has great partners like the Pucusana Project. Don't let me tell you about it. Why don't you watch?
I'm Allison Wallace, president of the Pucusana Project. There is no doubt COVID-19 made 2020 a difficult year for the entire world. But for underdeveloped countries, it has been detrimental. Peru is one of those places. With an economy that relies heavily on tourism, Peru didn't stand a chance against the pandemic. Their medical system collapsed back in May, putting Peru in the top 10 countries with the highest death-to-population rate for most of 2020. The sick were turned away at hospital doors, and their families were told that if they died, to wrap them in plastic and place them in the street for a truck to come pick them up. On top of that, quarantine and lockdown regulations made it extremely difficult for impoverished communities to access food. So while trying to fight COVID, millions of people started starving to death. But the Pucusana Project works in the poorest coastal city in Peru. 15,000 people living in extreme poverty, where the virus spread like wildfire. We spent all of this year putting our funding and resources into feeding the starving thousands. With the help of our local team, we went neighborhood by neighborhood and fed the most vulnerable and starving families every month. We also started helping supply dozens of soup kitchens to feed people every week. Even if COVID is eradicated, the hunger crisis has just begun. In the coming months, thousands of people living in Pucusana, Peru are relying on your donation for their next meal. The global hunger crisis is here, and we need your help to fight it. Please donate to the Pucusana Project.
People have asked me, as we talk about partnership, why are we partnering this way? Why are we doing this with these people? That's why we partner in Pucusana. We can't do it alone, but together we can change lives and do it not just for today, but for eternity. And that's what's so exciting. Allie, would you come on up here? And I'd like to introduce to you Allison Wallace. Her husband Topher's in the back doing some recording. So I'm really excited about, he and I actually started our relationship first and we got connected. Allison has been connected with me for 6 years. And I'm gonna tell you what, this is one amazing woman. And I think you're gonna be excited about what she has to say.
Thank you.
And you get this. I shut it off.
All right, thank you. Oh my goodness. Scott's gonna make me cry back there. It's been a crazy road. Actually, our ministry in Pucusana began like 15 years ago, but I helped kind of make it more official and started the official nonprofit 4 years ago. So that's why I'm up here talking today. Thank you so much for having me. This conference has just been wonderful. I hope you guys have all had a really great time here. I went to some of the breakout sessions earlier today, and I definitely think that the Lord is giving a theme, a message throughout everything that's going on here today, at least what I've witnessed so far. So I hope that my message can continue in that theme and what the Lord is trying to say here. So I'm going to jump right in. I could have chosen to just talk about my whole story with the Pucusana project, what we're actually like doing, what we used to do, what we hope to do. But I wanted to give a message and actually talk about something that's very close and dear to my heart today. So I hope that's all right. I'm going to talk about what global missions needs to look like post-pandemic. So yes, I'm going to talk about the pandemic, but don't worry, I'm not going to talk about like face masks and social distancing or anything like that. The Pucusana project works in Pucusana, Peru, the poorest coastal city. We work in education, poverty alleviation through education, and business training. We work in the poorest area in Peru, which is called the barrios. It's very similar to what you would think of as the slums, but we call it the barrios. We work giving workshops to unemployed mothers in the area. We teach them skills like how to make jewelry, how to make baskets, and how to prepare food, how to properly clean water, things like that, so that they can then become employed and work in local restaurants and schools in the area and bring an income into their families. We also work with a local school, a Christian school there, and we provide scholarships for students from the barrios to obtain a quality education. We do a number of outreach events in the community, and hopefully one day, with the help of the Brethren Church, we hope to launch the first modern Christian church and bring revival and just radical faith to Pucusana here in the future. Okay, so when the pandemic hit, just like here, everything stopped. Everything went into lockdown. All of our programs, all of our outreach, everything stopped, and everybody went into lockdown. Unlike here, underdeveloped countries did not have a system in place to support lockdown. In case you didn't know, South American countries are notorious for corruption. And I'm talking like they don't even try to hide the fact that they are laundering money and electing criminals to run their country. Their Congress in Peru is run by a majority that the people actually call a mafia. So it is just out of control corruption. Needless to say, the Peruvian government was no real help to the people when the pandemic started and throughout the pandemic the last year and a half. Because of years of corruption, the Peruvian medical system was in no way, shape, or form equipped to handle the outbreak. And in May of 2020, so the beginning of the pandemic, their medical system completely collapsed. As I said in the video, thousands of people were being turned away at hospital doors and told to quarantine in their homes. If you died, your family was told to wrap you in plastic and place you in the street, where a truck would come to pick up the dead and take them to mass grave burial grounds. There were no funerals. There was no saying goodbye to your loved ones. And on top of all of this, impoverished communities like Pucusana started starving to death. In Peru and much of the underdeveloped world, 75% of the population works on a daily wage. So what I mean by that is they work for a day, they get paid for that day, they buy the food that they need for that day off what they got paid that day. So when lockdown happened, it literally meant no food because you're not working. So people just started starving. In Pucusana, it was within weeks. I got a call from Elena saying that the military had showed up to block off the barrios from the local city where they would buy the groceries because the people were so afraid that because they were starving, they would start like going in mass groups into the city to try and get food, but they couldn't let people be in groups because of COVID. So the military showed up to literally keep people in the barrios, away from the city, in their homes, and they were starving to death. David Beasley, the director of the UN World Food Program, released a statement in the beginning of the pandemic saying, just as the coronavirus has ambushed millions of lives, we should brace ourselves for what is to come, another pandemic, the hunger pandemic. He said this a year and a half ago, so the hunger crisis is very much here. The latest polls, and these are recent, are showing that 40 million people around the world are experiencing extreme levels of hunger, which is the nice way of saying starving. And this is because of collapsed economies due to the pandemic. This is a 70% increase since 2019. That gives you a good idea of just how many people are now starving. In many parts of the world, lockdown gave criminal groups and terrorists space to take back power and have firmer strongholds of repression. Political leaders are being assassinated, and civil war has broken out in many countries. So some parts of the world that were safe, that we used to take vacations in, are no longer safe. It is non-negotiable, non-disputable that impoverished countries are tremendously more unstable now because of the pandemic. So what are we gonna do about it? I know a number of the Brethren Church ministries look very different now, Scott can tell you, and some of them might be permanently gone. We're all reevaluating how to best help these areas. Hearing about all that's happened in Peru and around the world can be really difficult. It kind of sounds like a horror movie, and that's because it kind of was, it kind of is. But don't let the horror of what you're now going to hear is happening around the world blind you to the real needs of the suffering. And let me explain what I mean by that. Americans have a lot. If we want to admit it or not, we are actually very materialistic. We've been taught to equate happiness and quality of life with possessions and statuses. If we see trash in the streets, non-drinkable tap water, we have to take cold showers, or if we see 4 generations of a family living in a house, we think, ooh, oh man, that's so sad, that's terrible. We should help them. But none of those things are a problem. All of those things are normal for those cultures. These things are not the real problem. When we look at the less fortunate, we feel bad. We even call them the less fortunate because it's unfortunate that they live differently than us. But this kind of thinking is wrong. There's nothing wrong with living like this, but how we think about this is wrong. We pity the poor. We pity them, and then we want to help them out of pity and out of guilt. Did you know that in the 60s, when televisions first started showing images of children starving all around the world, churches, nonprofits, and governments started giving substantial amounts of aid to those countries? We're talking $30 billion a year. But in the last 60 years, poverty has not decreased. It has actually increased. There's 2 reasons why. The first is that when governments receive aid from the US instead of from the taxes of their own people, this cuts off the people from holding all of the cards. So when the government doesn't deliver on services, which they don't, the people have no means to cut off powers or corruption or anything. The second reason is because charities give out free handouts. Charities like to give material resources like food, water, clothes, shoes. We do short-term mission trips where we go for a week and build a house and then we leave, and we're pretty proud of that usually. But giving away free handouts is rooted in pity, and it is an injustice to the poor. Pity is dangerous. Pity dehumanizes the poor. It tells them that they are helpless, that helpless is who they are, and that they only need our help to fix it. That we can fix all of their problems if they just do what we say and take what we give. Pity also hurts our eternal goals because it creates generations of people who become dependent on charities. Charities who come in the name of Jesus, but they don't actually preach personal responsibility and accountability that a life with Christ actually means. Why would I need to renew the way I think? Why would I need to lean on Christ for my needs when this charity will meet all of my needs? Why do I need to be invested in a church when just hopping between the churches will give me a free house and free food and free clothes? They don't become invested. They don't listen to our message. They just want free things. We have generations of people that act like this. Post-pandemic is a perfect time for us to create a different model for what global missions looks like. We cannot continue to give away free handouts because we know it doesn't work. and because it creates a huge sense of entitlement with the poor. This is why my company operates out of a no free handouts policy. No free handouts might sound harsh, but this forces us to look at the poor as completely capable of taking steps out of poverty themselves. It changes our projects, how we go about meeting the real material needs of the poor, and how we do short-term missions trips. Our company focuses on spreading the gospel message while alleviating poverty through education and business training. And education and business training require that they do all the work. And education creates more educators in the community. So if I teach you something, you're going to teach other people. It's all rooted in that saying, you teach a man to fish, he eats forever. You know that saying? One of our students, or actually many of our students that we teach who go through our school, go through our training, they actually come back and then they pour into the community. So we have one student who opened a barber shop and it was very successful. And he said, you know what? I know that this is a great way to make money, so I'm going to open more barber shops and teach more young men who are dropping out of school how to cut hair and how to make money doing that. That's not a part of our nonprofit, but that was a student of ours who then went and did that in the community. So I've been talking about the starving millions around the world, and now I'm talking about how to not give free handouts. So some of you are probably like, geez, this girl's heartless. No, that's not what I'm saying. As Scott was talking about, and as you saw in the video, when Pucusana started starving because of COVID, our nonprofit did everything in its power to help alleviate the hunger crisis. And God equipped us to do all of that. For a year and a half, money from the Pucusana Project and the Brethren Church had gone towards feeding thousands of people. Our local team went door to door, house to house, and gave enough food for a family of 5 to last a month. And we did this every month for a year. And then we also invested in 12 different soup kitchens located in different neighborhoods in the barrios. And people can come once a day for a free meal. The reason that we started stepping away from the food bags was because the economy started opening. So why do we need to keep supplying all the food when people can start going back to work? Well, they're not going to go back to work if we're just giving them free food. So we had to move away from that and just give one free meal away to start alleviating the need that was left. The need changed, so we needed to change with it. But thousands of people are alive in Pucusana because of the Brethren Church. And I'm very, very thankful and indebted to you for that. We are proud of the work that we did because sometimes it is necessary to give free handouts, but only in extreme cases like the pandemic, or when thousands of people are fleeing from genocide, or when a natural disaster creates thousands of people and makes refugees, political crises that cause people to flee their country. These extreme cases, it is necessary to help with material resources. But remember, long periods of free handouts drastically hurts the local economy of those towns and those cities, furthering poverty for not just years, but decades to come. It is good to be known as a trustworthy and reliable organization, but it's different when people become dependent on you. This is the line that we have to deal with in global missions. Be reliable and reliable and trustworthy, but not dependent. When we first started supplying food aid in Pucusana, we made sure that we were using local grocery stores, and we paid all of our leaders and truck drivers, trying to just alleviate some of that unemployment, even if just by a little bit. And it was only by a little bit. We also used a group of local volunteers to do absolutely everything. There was no way that we could have been able to sufficiently help Pucusana without these volunteers. They knew what the community needed and how to accomplish it. Our volunteers know the name of every leader in the barrio neighborhoods, and they were able to find out who the most vulnerable people were. And when I say the most vulnerable, I mean, we're talking about everyone's poor, everyone's impoverished, but the most vulnerable were the elderly who couldn't work, who couldn't leave their houses, and children. There were a lot of children who say lost their parents or lost their grandparent to COVID and were just living by themselves with their oldest sibling who's maybe 10 or 12 taking care of them. These children actually hide from the government because they'll be taken away from their other siblings. So they live by themselves, outcasted from society, hiding so that the government won't take them away. And luckily, our leaders were able to go neighborhood to neighborhood, door to door, and actually find those kids where they're living and bring them food bags so that they weren't starving. This network that existed is how we were able to feed everyone. This network that I didn't know existed, but that all of my leaders knew existed. It's so important that we use local leaders and volunteers for everything. It's easy for a person like me to go to an impoverished community and pass out food bags, and for all of those people to think, oh, we're so lucky that she came to help us. But when it's people from their own community, people that they grew up with, giving them the food bags, they're forced to look at themselves and say, oh yeah, how can I help too? Big difference. Trustworthy and reliable, but not dependent upon. So what if global missions post-pandemic looked like us walking into these communities and saying, you are smarter than me, you know what the real problems are in your community, and how can we do this together? Dignity, not pity, is where we need to be coming from. But honestly, this is where we should have been coming from all along. How do we give dignity to the poor? First, we must listen. Listen without judgment. What are their daily lives like? What are the real issues that they're facing in their culture? This is around the world because here is going to look different than Peru, and Peru is going to look different than India. So you have to learn about the culture and the community and what their real issues are. Listen and learn, because not every answer that you come up with is the right solution for them. Relationships. Build long-term relationships out of respect and understanding, not pity. Dignity is given when you see others as equals to you. The poor are equal to us. They can contribute just as we try to contribute. They are not beneath us in any way. Just like us, God gave them specific talents and abilities to overcome their circumstances. This is how we spread the gospel message as well, through relationships. Dignity comes from pouring into someone the truth God says about them. So when you find out that the woman you've been ministering to is actually not married, and the father of her 5 children is 3 different men, speak the truth. Christ died for that. When you discover the majority of the men in your community are alcoholics, speak the truth. Christ died for that. And when you learn about all the kids who are skipping school and that 72% of the girls will be pregnant with their second child by the age of 21, speak the truth. Christ died for that. Dignity through relationships. And lastly, dignity through opportunities. After understanding the real needs that the community faces, and you will be tempted, but don't give away free handouts to fill those needs. Instead, provide opportunities for them to step out of their circumstances themselves. An example of this is back in 2019, of course, it's before the pandemic, we had a clothing event where we brought 800 pieces of donated clothing to Pucusana, and we held a fair type event for people to come and get clothing, and we were filling that very real material need that they had. But instead of giving the clothing away for free, we asked everyone who attended to purchase a ticket to come to the fair, be it a very cheap ticket. They still had to purchase a ticket. If they wanted to obtain any of the clothing, we asked for a donation. We asked them to donate what money they could afford, into 5 different yellow boxes.
These yellow boxes filled some of the needs that our organization needed to help obtain and maintain the property there. So these people who come and receive help from us all the time could then pour back into that ministry that they're a part of through contributing to the water bill and maintenance on the building. They could put money towards plants and flowers for the garden. They could also help with taxes, things like that. A lot of the kids would come up and put their money in the water container because I'm pretty sure they thought we were like giving them a pool or something like that. But you know what? We had like 100 people come to this event, and everyone donated. Every single person living in the barrios that attended our event donated what money they could. They wanted to do that. They wanted to give back. It made them feel good inside. It gave them dignity. One man in specific that I will never forget came to our event with his daughter. After we explained the event to him, he took out 80 soles, which is a lot of money for them. It's about $25. And he took his daughter over to the box that said taxes, and he put the donation in the tax box. And then he knelt down to his daughter and he said, "Today, I have the opportunity to spoil you. So go pick something out for yourself and help me find something for your mother." And that's what they did. This man felt such pride being able to use his hard-earned money to clothe his family. All we did was provide that opportunity for him. The poor are not helpless. Impoverished people are better than their circumstances, and they need to be treated that way. Dignity empowers positive change. If you or your ministry that you're a part of, or you might know of a ministry, there are some really, really big charities out there who operate out of free handouts. So I'm not here to say, like, slander them and stomp on them, stop donating to them. But I am going to challenge you to make a plan for how to exit out of supporting those ministries, or how to change your ministry to have a self-sustaining model for the impoverished communities that they're trying to help. Moving forward, post-pandemic, what if all church plants were self-sustaining and didn't have to receive aid from the United States? What if all poverty alleviation created stable economies to raise the entire community out of poverty through jobs? And what if short-term missions trips were a part of long-term investments, working with the people, alongside the people, doing what God equipped all of them to do? Now more than ever, global missions needs to have people who are business-minded, entrepreneurial-minded people, people with big ideas that can come up with creative ways and even simple ways of implementing them. I expect it'll be at least another 6 months before the Pucusana project and the Brethren Church can stop supplying food aid to Pucusana. But we do already have a plan in place for how to remove ourselves from that so that the people continue working and continue trying to be self-sufficient. The Pucusana project's goals remain the same post-pandemic as they were before: to spread the gospel message while alleviating poverty through education and business training. And God enables us to do this come what may, rain, sleet, snow, or pandemic. I want to finish with a quote from the book called When Helping Hurts. If you have not read this, do it. We are not bringing Christ to the poor. He has been active in these communities since the creation of the world, sustaining them by his powerful word. A significant part of working in poor communities involves discovering and appreciating what God has been doing there for a long time, long before we got there. This should give us a sense of humility and awe as we enter into poor communities, for part of what we see there reflects the very hand of God. Of course, the residents of these communities may not recognize that God has been at work. In fact, they might not know who God is at all. So a part of our task will include introducing the community to who God is and to help them appreciate all he has done for them, not what we have done for them or are going to do for them. And I would add to this quote, a part of our job is helping impoverished communities see the unique identity and skills the Lord has already given them to step out of poverty themselves. Now more than ever, it is imperative that our job as ministry leaders, missionaries, church planters, and workers of poverty alleviation is to do it by giving dignity. No pity and no free handouts. Instead, invest in dignity, Christ-centered relationships, long-term solutions with the people there, and self-sustaining projects. Thank you.